scary to the powers that be occurs, and they don't expect us to survive that. So in their viewpoint, those guys that are going to go hide in the hidey holes in the ground have the best option. But again, I'm of the opinion that a breakaway civilization exists from the shadow government, and their intent is to weather the coming solar system cataclysm off planet, and they'll be the people that survive. There's some suggestion in our data that we could interpret as being a situation where after the cataclysmic events of 2012 and 13, maybe as late as 2015, if you will, an invasion force of humans comes from some refuge and resets up on the planet and very quickly reestablishes a large technological society in the midst of the rest of us who are surviving as scavenging primitives, more or less.
Okay, let's go to Kelly now in Atlanta, Georgia. You're on with the WebBot folks. Go ahead, Kelly.
Yes, thanks for having me on. Do you have any information on two things regarding banks? They, say it's FDIC insured, but maybe in the long run, in some way, it isn't, or it won't be, and so the money will be gone. And also, any information coming up on government takeover of pension funds, 401ks, IRAs?
George can get into the details as to how underfunded FDIC is, but yes, in a general sense, the government is going to get to a situation where they will be forced to look at any and all methods of rounding up money to get through day-to-day kind of crises. And we know that our politicians do not have any moral fortitude, and they will attempt to seize retirement. But how they'll go about that is anybody's guess. There may be laws, and we're already seeing capital controls in the United States. You can't take money out. It'll be taxed at a 30% rate, et cetera. If you try and do this, you're going to have to fight to get it back. So all of those things.
You might have to wait a week, something like that.
No, I think you may end up having to wait months if you're trying to take money out of the country. So I think it'll get to the point where we actually are replicating what occurred to the individuals in Germany. And we're probably about late 1939 relative to currency controls.
Any other follow-up there, Kelly?
Well, and it's I think you answered it earlier with just an earlier caller. If you have paper, turn it into something you can eat. So
yeah,
absolutely.
Something that you can turn into a productive in the future value.
Yeah, so it may make sense if you had $300 or $400 sitting around and you needed to get rid of it at some point because the value of the money is crashing, and you were a carpenter. Oh, you're going out and buy that, that bandsaw, that kind of thing.
There's a place in the data, looks like Clif for the Great Conversion.
Correct.
Where a great number of Americans and globally wake up to this, and we're seeing the leading edge of it now. If you look at gardening magazines, you'll see that the hand tools for gardening are really just taken off like crazy lately.
That's a good point. Interesting. And we know, did you two do the ammo shortage that occurred about a year ago?
Yeah, we dealt with that. That was actually about a year and a half, wasn't it?
It was almost 3 years ago when I started covering it.
Yeah.
So you were way ahead of the curve.
We see that stuff come way ahead of time.
And we will have more and more shortages. We're in a severe area relative to food. We see that the fisheries is going to be a real problem to the point where, like all of the branded seafood restaurants, next year more than this year, but in late 2010 we'll start having a problem getting supply. What's a fish place going to do when it can't get fish?
What are they going to do? Next up, we go to Wilmington, Delaware. Robert, all well on the East Coast? Go ahead.
Oh, George, I was so mad my toast was burning. You had me gone, I'll tell you. Gentlemen, my question is, do you see any terrorist attacks coming at us?
Again, and if there's going to be one, it'll be between November 8th and 11th, and I'm saying that simply because that's a tipping point. The last time we had a major terrorist attack was on 9/11. Whether or not, the government gets away with its involvement in that is anybody's guess historically. If there is another one, I suspect that its reception will be not as the powers that be anticipate. So that would certainly cause the one scenario. Okay, see, basically we get these large brush strokes, and we have to use our little monkey minds to fill in the various little scenarios, and we do planning. So one scenario would be false flag terrorist attack on the United States that takes 4 days to play out, and a huge rebellion on the part of the population in the sense of a refusal to believe it, that over the next 2.5 months leads to an active rebellion state that gets us into early 2011 and leads to the reformation of our country.
One of the things that I've been doing some speculation on outside of the actual WebBot work is the possibility that whatever happens in the way of next terrorist attack would somehow involve the Internet. Now, whether that means we're going to have bands of hackers taking out key SCADA infrastructure or whatever is really a moot point. But if you look at the last depression, what happened in 1934 was the passage of the Communications Act. And it's at that point that the government stepped in and said, okay, all this free radio stuff, gonna get control of it here, and then radio got parceled out in what seemed like a reasonable way at the time, and then I think it was Reagan era, we started seeing the abandonment of the concentration of media power rules. Mm-hmm. And so now what we're setting up for would be a similar grab of the Internet, so that if you can envision a terrorist event, false flag or otherwise, doesn't really matter, and you can say, they did it using the Internet.
It was this key component. Yep.
Key component, right. That gives them an excuse, kind of a Reichstag fire kind of a thing, saying, we must all have chips now. You must have a biometric chip in your hand in order to use a computer on the Internet or something.
Buy your license or whatever.
Yeah. Scan your driver's license, that kind of thing. And the reasons for doing that, I mean, from a control standpoint, it's not a bad strategy. As a free human being, it doesn't sound like we, the people, will be in charge much, but
we're not now. We haven't been since 1956.
Yeah,
I think Richard Dolan and those guys are quite correct. So a terrorist attack would disrupt our local infrastructure in the sense of the United States, even if there was, let's not even go that far, but a major nuclear incident of some kind. So those kind of things are essentially local to a national border situation, and our larger problem is really over our heads in this breakaway civilization and the shadow government. They've been bleeding us dry, and a lot of our current economic issues and the slavery we find ourselves in to debt is merely to support the trillions of dollars that are getting sucked out of the planetary economy. Where is it going?
There's a piece in the Washington Times in the Friday editions that one of my readers just sent me that says Internet taxation is on the way. So whether it comes due to taxation or due to false flag, control on the Internet looks like it's baked in the cake at some point. Now, whether that accounts for the data gap,
no, that I can't see that as being a mechanistic issue. No.
Yeah.
Okay, next up we go to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. First-time caller. Hello, Ellen. Go ahead.
How are you guys? Listen, I want to know, worst-case scenario, how long would you have to be prepared to survive for?
Rest of your life.
Oh, okay. No, because I always have dreams, and they kind of give me messages. I had a dream before the stock market went off, and, I told everybody prepare and, start stocking up on food. Prices were going up, and just recently I have a lot of anxiety, apprehensive about something's coming. And usually when an earthquake occurs, I get like a pain in my head, and the next day, sure enough, there's an earthquake. But I've always been sensitive since I was a child and could see things into the future.
You may be feeling the impact of whatever it is that's going to hit us in November. I have a lot of people telling me that, that they know something's coming, they can kind of feel the itch in the middle of their back.
Sure.
It's not that close, but it's this year.
Right, exactly. And why would people want to put trust in the government? I always thought when they guaranteed that money after the Depression, your money's only as good as the government is, and we don't know how good the government really is anymore.
It all depends on who we elect and whether they take checks from outside their home district, doesn't it?
And they probably all do, don't they?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Well, there are other issues that, from my viewpoint, I see things in a huge, broad sweep. And so there's some very large issues that are at play now. They're actually larger than our government and even larger than any government in the sense that they're pan-humanity. And those issues are shifting and fading from the Piscean way of thinking of schooling fish, if you will, in control systems into an Aquarian mind state. It is no joke that these astro influences, however we want to label them, are indeed playing out. And part of the Piscean thing is the hardening of control as they fight desperately to maintain a control system that the rest of us know has got to die and got to go. So we're watching the death of an empire, and like a giant beast flailing around, we're seeing it slowly expire, and it's taking a lot of us with it. But in the end, we will remain, and it will have passed. And those are the kind of broad themes that are playing out at the moment. And we can get lost in the immediacy of the economic details. But as long as you lift your head up a little bit, you say, oh, yeah, I'm going to suffer for a while. But in the end, it'll be much better because we'll have removed these, these oppressive slave masters.
A lot of people, like George and Cliff, who have been calling this program, feel as if something impending is out there, too. I have felt it for months and months and months. We'll just have to see what happens, but I do find it to be riveting that through the web bot, you two feel that and see that, too. Let's come right back with final phone calls with George Ure and Cliff High right here on Coast to Coast AM. And George Norrie back at you with Coast to Coast AM as we talk more about the web project. How far out does the web project go, George and Cliff? I mean, can you predict 20, 30, 40 years out?
We actually do have long-range values that go out 82 years because it's an archetype based on the length of a generation, and some of these language parts go out 4 generations.
That's a long
right,
way.
But as I note, our level of granularity falls off. So if, for instance, we were to look at the what we call the Terra entity, Earth changes, from our viewpoint, Earth changes seem to settle down around 2041. But that's just the long-range data, and we, of course, could be wrong.
Okay, let's go back to the phones. We'll go to Mill Creek, Utah. Michelle, you're up west of the Rockies. Hi.
Hi. I was going to ask about electronic banking, decided it was a stupid question.
Never a stupid question, but go ahead.
If everything goes out and we have no power, how are we going to control the money that we have in the banks, first of all? But what I really want to ask about, I have been hearing that the government wants to take over all of the water that runs to the ocean. And quite honestly, it all runs to the ocean.
They pretty much have already succeeded in several different levels. So, yeah, I would agree with you. There's been a big move since at least the late 60s just for that, for taking over water rights.
I know my brother in Colorado, it is illegal for them to collect water from their roof and put it into barrels.
You're
illegal.
kidding. They can't collect roof water?
Because it disrupts the flow to streams.
Oh, that's
They're
right.
considering that around in
Yeah,
the
he
dry
must
parts
be on
of Washington.
Front Range up there.
Yeah.
And is that legal? That's legal?
Anything that they make into a law that is passed by our, quote, leaders is indeed legal.
Is legal.
Is it moral or ethical?
And if the courts hold it up, sure.
Yeah. And will they enforce it? That's another issue entirely.
Okay. Thank you. You've scared me a lot.
Sorry about that. Eat pie, have naps.
Not the intent. People just get scared.
No, the intent actually is if you know something is out there and is a potential, you can plan for it. And with a plan, you're much better at dealing with it and coping with it. But if it just comes on up and kicks you in the butt and you're unaware of it, well, there you go.
And George, we want folks to be able to see some of this stuff far ahead in advance, so they can get gutter for their house before it requires a permit.
Good point. Let's go to Sean in Knoxville, Tennessee. Good morning, Sean. You're up with us.
Hey, nice to talk to you.
Sure thing.
I was just wondering if you guys had any useful, specific information for the year to come,